Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing just great.
Dr. Kimberly Young, who is in her second year of residency training, is a rarity. In 17 months, she will become a full fledged primary care doctor, and she plans to set up practice in either rural Oklahoma or rural Kansas. Growing up in a small Kansas town, she and her family only knew one doctor, and that doctor knew them all personally. So Kimberly's first year as a resident was a real wake up call.
I got to the big city. I was in Chicago, Detroit, New York, Portland, Maine, and realized that they didn't really know their patients at all. We would go in during my surgery rotation and not know the name of the person that we were cutting open. We just knew the organ we were taking out. And I realized that that was not the kind of medicine that I knew.
She is now finishing her residency training at the Caney Valley Medical Clinic, which serves about 500 people in Ramona, Oklahoma, and the farms around it. Her supervisor, Dr. Michael Woods, has been in practice for more than 2 decades. He loves his job as a primary care doctor.
To walk in the room and see a patient that you've taken care of for 20 years and know their families, delivered their kids, be such a part of their family that you're invited to everything that they do as a family.
But he knows most doctors prefer an urban setting.
When you're looking at 25% of the population lives in rural communities and less than 10% of the physicians practice in rural communities, and that's nationwide, and Oklahoma is right in there with similar statistics.
When Dr. Woods graduated from the University of Oklahoma College of Medicine in 1987, he had $50,000 of student loans to repay. It is a much different story for most doctors today.
When all is said and done, how much will you owe for medical
I
school?
will owe pretty close to $300,000.
And as a primary care physician, she will be earning significantly less than specialists do. Dr. Woods says that is one reason the number of primary care physicians is dwindling, especially in the rural areas.
Even if they really wanted to do primary care and family practice, tend to be afraid of it because they're looking at a $300,000 debt they've got to get paid, and it's a lot easier to pay a $300,000 debt back when you're making $300,000 to $500,000 a year than when you're making $150,000 a year.
Another reason doctors won't go to rural areas is because of the commitment it takes.
If you're in primary care, oftentimes it's easier to practice in a group where you share call. Well, that means you want 7 or 8 doctors that are in your group that you share weekend call with, so that you're not on call every weekend. If you're an individual in a small town and the only doctor in town, you really have got a 24-hour-a-day obligation, and it takes a special doc to really want to take that on.
Dr. Gerard Clancy is the president of the OU School of Community Medicine in Tulsa. At the on-campus clinic, doctors see 300,000 patients a year.
60% of our patients come from Tulsa County, but 40% come from across Oklahoma. And we here in Tulsa at the OU Medical School, School of Community Medicine, care for patients from almost all counties as well. So people will travel a long way to get health care where there's access.
The Pippin family drove an hour to get to the OU clinic from their hometown of Peggs, just north of Tahlequah. Renee Pippin is expecting a baby boy in April.
Right now I actually see a midwife because there's only one OB in Tahlequah that I know of, other than the Indian hospital, and I'm not Indian, so I don't qualify.
Renee came here because there are no level 2 ultrasound machines where she lives. An examination using the more sophisticated ultrasound is something she requires at this stage of her pregnancy because of some family genetic issues.
Oh, I see his face.
Here, an ultrasound technician takes detailed photos of the baby in the womb. Her husband and their 4-year-old watch it all.
Look, there's his chin, there's his lips, his nose, there's his forehead. That's his face. He's looking up. Do you see it?
See my baby brother? See him moving?
I do.
See his head?
Yeah. A big old head like you.
And while Renee is happy for the technology Tulsa offers, she's glad she isn't a patient at a practice with multiple obstetricians who share calls.
If I lived like in Tulsa, I would hate to think, oh, well, has he even seen my chart before he comes in and delivers my baby?
Right.
You know, does he know any of my background, any of the other complications that I've had all along the way? You know, or is he relying on a nurse to tell him, hey, this was in my chart?
If she has no complications, Renee's midwife will be present for the delivery. But many pregnant women in rural areas do have complicated pregnancies.
So we have patients that come to us as far away as Poto. Saw a lady last week from Independence, Kansas, people from around Fort Smith, Arkansas, the entire eastern part of the state.
Dr. Michael Gardner is the chair of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at the OU School of Community Medicine. He says Tulsa and Oklahoma City are the only places where women with high-risk pregnancies can get proper care. Dr. Gardner says women from rural areas face more challenges.
So we have women that will stay in the hospital with us for weeks because if they lived in Tulsa, perhaps they'd be able to go home because they're near a facility with a high-risk nursery. But when they live in some of these smaller towns, it just wouldn't be safe to send them an hour, 2 hours away. So they wind up spending weeks on end with us, which, as you can imagine, most people prefer to be home than be in a hospital.
He knows many communities in Oklahoma don't even have OBGYNs. The cost of malpractice insurance is one reason. The job is also very demanding.
Some of these towns, when you can only have enough volume to support one OB-GYN, very few physicians want to be on call every night, seemingly for the rest of their lives.
We've got to figure out a way to make rural Oklahoma attractive to those physicians. There is a tradition that individuals from rural areas more often return to rural areas as far as practicing physicians. So we've got to have a physician recruitment initiative of rural Oklahomans who want to go into medicine and want to return back to rural Oklahoma as well.
Dr. Clancy applauds the work of Dr. Woods, who manages a residency program for students that are inclined to be primary physicians in rural areas. He currently supervises 6. Every Tuesday is an academic day for the medical students.
So on the metric, we want at least 10 patients from every one of you that are diabetic out of the clinic. The nurse is going to have them take off their shoes and socks before you ever see them.
Dr. Woods says 80% of the residents he has trained have set up practice in small towns or rural settings. Because of Oklahoma's aging physician workforce, he expects the demand for rural doctors to double. The state ranks 14th in the nation for the number of physicians who are older than 60. Woods says replacing them with new doctors is nearly impossible.
They're not quite willing to sacrifice all of their life, personal, everything else for medicine. So it's getting to where it'll take 2 physicians to replace every rural one that retires now.
The rewards of practicing country medicine are more than financial. For some dedicated doctors like Kimberly Young, gratitude from patients is worth its weight in gold.
All right, anything else today?
No, but I just want to thank you for treating me like part of the family and
You're
having
welcome.
enough time to spend a little one-on-one time instead of rushing in and rushing out.
You're welcome. I only do it for my favorite patients.